You've been cordially invited today to discuss the topic of the game that is only played by 100 or 200 people in the entire world at any point. Whatever, dude. Anyway, remember if you like these videos, like, sub, silly, comment, share, support the channel if you want. I do appreciate it. So I was thinking maybe I could do a different kind of video to keep the... I know this game is very niche, but whatever. It keeps the game or the channel active as I talk about... Karnovs Revenge, I guess, tier list. So what about Clayton judges other people's opinions on games and tier lists, right? And so let's talk about Karnovs Revenge. So we're going to do some old school Japanese tier lists, and we're going to do some new school Japanese tier lists. And I would say Karnovs Revenge is kind of an interesting game because if you go off the regular idea that, kind of like a narrative that the Japanese are always the best, I think you can definitely look at Karnovs Revenge and, well, fuck, the Japanese have said that I was the best in the world at one point, so... I mean, there it is, right? But I think it's a game that, if you look at it, it's not, not a game that the Japanese dominate compared to America, right? And it's also interesting because if you look at this very old tier list, it is, it kind of shows you how the game was played and what people thought was possible, right? So I said that I got into the game because... I think probably like a lot of people, they remembered the game as a kid. But then there was that great grapple tournament. It was a big Karnovs Revenge tournament in Japan. And there was like a big combo and tech video for the game. And it was really interesting and kind of like mind-opening. It's like, wow, you can do a lot of cool shit in this game, right? For sure. And I think that was in the early 2000s that came out. But then when you saw the tournament was not as crazy as the combo video stuff, right? The tech video. The game, it was not as crazy, right? And of course, tournaments are, it is what it is. Sometimes you play better, sometimes you play worse. You know what I mean? Like maybe people are just having a bad day. You could use me as an example. Look at that Hyper Alpha tournament that I got second at Evo. That is... It's not even that impressive when you look at the videos of me beating people. And that's technically a world tournament, right? But then you look at me when I used to play the Japanese or something, I was in a lot more crazy shit, right? So tournaments are iffy because it's just a single moment in time. But generally speaking, if you just watch matches, a lot of matches, whatever it was for the game, they're not super impressive and you don't see a lot of shit you saw in that combo video, right? And I know this was a long tangent, and that's how I got into the game, because I remember seeing that, and then when I got a better computer, maybe it was I think it was after I was dying in 2008, so it might have been 2009, then I started playing the game, because I'm like, you know what, I bet I can do that combo. You know what I mean? I was like, I can do this shit in a real match, and I said, even when I started playing for those few years, and I learned the game within 2 weeks, and I was like, beating people is ridiculous, right? But... even when I first started playing, I only saw a couple Japanese dudes ever even attempt the big mizoguchi combos. Even attempt them, and they only did it off of a dizzy, right? They were never doing it off straight hits. So the game was not actually played, you know what I mean, like it could be played. And if it was, there was never any match footage of it, that's for fucking sure. And those few years that I would play the game randomly, sporadically, no one was doing the shit I was doing, right? And I think you can see that because if you look at, I think there's something clear that sticks out here when I look at an early Japanese tier list to me. I'm just going to talk about mizoguchi, right? Specifically. Again, Yomi is always a theoretical character because she's hard to judge because, it's kind of like, well, theoretically she could be very powerful, but I've never seen her played like that, right? So you look at a character like, I agree, I can see this, right? Sanche... I feel like Samche's probably a little bit more even, but I could see why they would say that Mizoguchi could lose because, again, I've talked about people being character apologists before. I'm not a Mizoguchi apologist, okay? Mizoguchi excels, or I should say Mizoguchi is good at one part of the game. He's bad at the lame you out fireball part of the game kind of thing, but he is kind of good at I got coin flipped. The problem is that Mizoguchi's good damage, his coin flip nature, when you look at the characters above him, he no longer is special in that sense, right? When you look at the characters below him, well, I don't know why the fuck Gene is there. Gene there is ridiculous. I don't know, right? But you know what I mean? it is what it is. He's good at one part of the game. He's bad at another part, right? And I think when I look at this tier list, you can see that people, Mizoguchi linking off of every hit consistently was not deemed as realistic because you look at a character, these stick out to me, right? It's very obscure. Clown versus Mizoguchi, if this is a 5, you gotta assume that they're thinking that Mizoguchi's gonna get lamed out by Clown, right? Because when I look at this, I think of Clown's saving grace, besides the fact that Clown can lame you out a bit, is Clown doesn't do good damage, and some of Mizoguchi's bigger combos, once Clown is dizzy, if Clown ducks or if you try to jiggy off of certain hits, Mizoguchi's biggest combos are kind of iffy versus him, right? But if Mizoguchi gets in, the little punch DP is actually pretty annoying for Clown, I feel like. I would say that Mizoguchi wins, right? So you got to think that the Japanese are going, Mizoguchi's getting lamed out most of the time. His big combos aren't realistic. But then you look at a character like Gene. I think Gene is terrible for Mizoguchi, right? So how does Mizoguchi beat Gene when Gene, I feel like, would be laming Mizoguchi out more than Clown, right? So that sticks out as very strange to me, right? Like, what is the thought process here? But I think overall, when you look at this tier list, I would think that some things the Japanese just did not feel were realistic at the time to do competitively, I guess, maybe. That is my assumption when I look at this tier list. Then you look at a more recent tier list for this game from a Japanese dude. And my comment on this is, I think this is weird to keep. I think this makes a broken game. Like I said, the game's kind of broken, but there's a little bit of a balance in the chaos. I think this game makes the game look too broken by having so many numbers or letters, right? Again, I only have 4 things when I think of it. I don't think it's that drastic, but this guy thinks it's pretty drastic, right? And again, I think Mizoguchi, I don't see Mizoguchi being same as Karnov as Jane. That's ridiculous to me. But I should have put the quote, but from what I understand, if we look at this, and hopefully you can roll with me in my theory, Zazzy, as I've said, Zazzy, I agree, is the cheapest character of the game. But I think Ray is probably the best because the bad thing about Ray, right, is if you think Ray does little damage. But Ray's bad, quotation marks, damage is mitigated if you can electric tackle 100% of the time, right? Then he does actually okay damage. And he is not committing himself. Whereas Zazzy, when Zazzy is the cheapest character in the game, Zazzy is throwing himself into the fire, so to speak. But even when I've used the comparison of Mizoguchi versus Zazzy in terms of flipping a coin, when Zazzy flips a coin and he beats you, he has the gun to your head. When Mizoguchi flips a coin and beats you, it also takes a lot more execution than to execute the kill combo, right? So I think this is weird too, because if you're thinking the Japanese guy, because the Japanese guy apparently he thinks that Mizoguchi beats Ray. That's one of Zazzy's weakness. He actually can lose to Mizoguchi. This is strange to me because if you look at that, it's so weird. Like, my Japanese is iffy, right? Like if I'm playing a dating game or reading a manga, as long as it's not too complicated and I know what I'm looking for, because, Japanese is kind of a low context language, I think. You're assuming all the time, right? And man, if you hear me talk, I'm not good on video game lingo. I just randomly play. I'm not good on nerd speak, right? I don't know I've never been a frame data guy, any of this shit. I just play. So if I'm already bad at the American version of shorthand video game phrase, sometimes I think, should I talk to the Japanese about this shit? It's like, my Japanese is iffy when it's shorthand and it's very iffy. I can't even speak nerd lingo in fucking English, right? So I don't know, but apparently I guess they think that Mizoguchi actually can beat Zazzy. But I think this is weird because, what a long tangent again. If Zazzy is in such a higher tier than characters like Ray and Lee, all these other characters, you must be assuming that him throwing himself into the fire is negligible because he's just that cheap. So if that is your theory, then how the fuck can you honestly say that Mizoguchi beats Zazzy? Like I said, I think Zazzy is terrible for Mizoguchi because for Mizoguchi, when he coin flips against Zazzy, a lot of times the coin flip has to be the big blue DP. You've instantly lost when you do that. It's like a last ditch effort kind of thing, right? Again, I think it's a terrible matchup. I mean, sounds like a Zazzy apologist. Man, I might flip a coin. You know, we flip a coin 4 times. One of the times I might lose. So I'm going to say I lose to that character because I might lose a coin flip 1 out of 4 times. Jesus Christ. Anyway. And then this, I guess there was a guy, and this guy posts on my YouTube as well sometimes. This guy did a player 1 and player 2 tier list, I guess, for Karnov. And if you don't know, Karnov's Revenge, for some moves, player 2 gets 1 more frame of advantage, but then player 1 can do cross-ups that player 2 can't do. So, but I guess this is one of those things when I talk about sensationalizing matchups. I think about 3 points. Karnov loses to Mizoguchi 3.5. Are you serious? That's basically you're telling me this is a counter character matchup. Like I said, I think Karnov versus Mizoguchi. I think it's probably 4.5 for Mizoguchi. I think he probably slightly loses because overall Mizoguchi, he has a couple of good counters. You can hard punch through DP poke strings. And if Karnov goes to the fireball, you can hurricane kick, which will hit 2 times. Sometimes will hit a 3-time dizzy spot, and then if you execute. But even if you think, okay, Mizoguchi has a couple of good options that discourage Karnov from doing what he does, Karnov still has Yoga Flame. Karnov doesn't have to do this. Karnov is just a better character than Mizoguchi. Karnov has an infinite, so I think this is kind of sensationalism too. Like I talk about, 6-4, you beat a character. When you start saying 6.5, you're kind of saying that's a counter character. 7, clear cut. When you got this guy, he's actually saying I lose 8-2 to some characters. That's like, man, when I see an 8-2 matchup, I basically think that's unwinnable, right? 8-2, if you lose 8-2, that basically is telling me that the matchup is basically unwinnable. 9-1 is if I set down the controller for half the match, I guess, right? I don't know. 8-2 kind of. I feel like this is very in a game where you can die so fast. I mean, and for this, I need to see some better reasoning, right? Anyway, Clayton Judge's tier list. Is this a new topic for the show? I don't know, dude. Remember, if you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you want. I appreciate it. Thanks.